Number 5 on this list is a mistake. So I know that's kind of weird. How do you discover a mistake? Well, in a story from One Dumb Diver, and yeah, that is their actual handle, they do just that. They write, "When I was 15, I took the family boat out and dove the reef myself to clear my head. That was mistake number 1. I was down at a depth of about 90 feet when I was only rated for 60. While diving, I spotted a 3.5 meter mako shark coming right at me. For those who are unaware, makos are basically the cheetahs of the ocean, and they only have 2 speeds. Curious, which is harmless, and lunch. This guy was in lunch mode, so I hovered, as I'd been trained to do since there was no way for me to escape it. Nowadays, we dive with shark shields which emit electronic pulses that freak the sharks out and keep them away, but back then, what we used was essentially a chainmail sleeve, the idea being that sharks hate the taste of metal, so if you give it your arm, it'll bite down, decide you're gross, and move along. So I wait, and it comes, and I make a perfect move to give it my arm. However, just before the crunch, it occurred to me that I'd left my sleeve on my bed. I had my knife drawn, however now I had a series of problems. I had a huge open gashing wound on my arm from the bite in open water and trailed blood everywhere. Once the shock wore off, you realize that you're in salt water, and salt water and open wounds, they don't feel too good. In a panic, I dropped my weight belt and shot up to the surface without any sort of waiting period. Because I hadn't been paying attention to the currents, I was approximately a quarter mile downstream of my boat, which means I had to swim up to it. So I end up racing back to shore with nothing more than a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. Long story short, my series of unfortunate self-inflicted events earned me 172 stitches, boatloads of physical therapy because the shark had actually bitten down into my tricep and detached it, and easily identifiable scars on one of my arms for the rest of my life. So that story right there, folks, is why I personally don't think I'm ever going deep sea diving. I love sharks, they're super cool, I love to learn about sharks, but I am more than happy to keep them in a tank at the aquarium and learn about them in that way. Swimming with them or discovering one in front of you on the day that you also forgot your protective gear, not something that sounds like a great time. Number 4 on this list is a barracuda. El Herrera 9519 writes, "One time when my parents visited Mexico, they went diving and my mom was slightly lower down than my dad, looking at the ocean floor. My mom had on a gold necklace that was floating in the water around her. It was a sunny day and a fairly shallow dive, so it was sparkling. My mom looked below at all the critters when my dad grabbed her and started frantically shaking her arm to get her attention. She looked up, and a barracuda was directly in front of her, staring intently at the shiny necklace. She slowly moved up her hand to cover the necklace, and then slowly and calmly moved away from it, and it took off without bothering them anymore, but still pretty unsettling, and taught my mom to be a little bit more aware of her surroundings when diving." So I looked it up, and barracudas can grow to be 1.8 meters in length. Pair that with their extremely sharp teeth and the fact that shiny objects remind them of the little silver fish that they eat, and you have yourself in a pretty bad situation. The woman in this story is honestly extremely lucky that this fish waited to decide if it was going to attack or not. Most times she wouldn't have had time to respond, and it would have just gone to take a bite. Considering this necklace would have been around her neck, having a barracuda bite into it could have ended very badly. Number 3 on this list is a kelp forest. Duct Tape Jedi writes, "After a day of boat diving in Monterey Bay on the California coast, we had a night dive planned. I was there with 2 friends celebrating my birthday, and we were part of a larger group of divers. My friends were too tired for the night dive, and I was too, but I got invited to buddy with another diver whose friends also decided to stay on the boat. So I was following my new buddy through the kelp when some of it caught on my tank. I tried to pull clear but managed to get tangled even more to the point where I was unable to move. I kept shining my light around looking for my buddy, but he was nowhere to be seen. After what seemed like an hour but was possibly just a few minutes, I felt some of the kelp loosen up and then saw that my buddy was cutting it off with a knife. I was so exhausted after struggling that when we got to the surface, he had to tow me back to the boat." So discovering a full-on kelp forest, I mean, that would honestly be really cool, I think. Obviously, what happened to our diver would have been incredibly scary though. Having to wrestle for over an hour, or however long he was there for, with some kelp in the dark, probably thinking that you're going to drown, Doesn't sound great. But if you did discover a kelp forest and that didn't happen, then I think it'd be pretty sweet. If you're going to go though, then make sure you carry your own knife, because you wouldn't want to end up like our friend here. Number 2 on this list is a body. This story is from Texas Guy 911, and he says, I was diving in a local pond with a group of much more advanced cave divers than I was. I'm leading the dive as to get used to the pressures and responsibilities of heading the procession, and they're mentoring me. The known horrible visibility makes it impossible to navigate by compass, so we follow a line put by other divers. These lines go from one sunken item to another. So I know I'm about to hit a small sunken boat, but I don't remember which one. There are a few similar in a row in the same state of decay. I'm the first in the group, and I get to the boat, and I see someone's black army boots sticking out from the inner quarters. It looks somewhat new, not like items you find on the bottom. It's hard to see due to so much muck in the water. So I touch the boot, thinking it's by itself, but it won't lift, like it's attached to something heavy. I put my hand further in and feel the leg continuing out, pants, the calf, and now I see the second leg. I turn around and show a sign for the emergency ascend to the group behind me. Everyone has a sour face. Nobody wants to go to the surface, but it's a rule that if one says up, others in the group must abort, no questions. They wanted me to explain with signs why, but what's a diver's sign for a corpse? I feel like I rush toward the surface, even though I'm trying to stay calm and take time. So we're on the lake's surface. I have this adrenaline rush, can't breathe enough. So I tell them there's a body down there. I see rolling eyes from everyone once they see I'm serious. I describe in detail what I saw, and then we go down again. Once we locate it, we don't know if we should go forward or backward, as there are several boats on the line, and who knows in which boat the body is in and how far we drifted while taking it out on the surface. Well, we find all the boats before seeing the original one, of course. So our customary leader goes into the boat's cabin and we wait. I'd say he was rather courageous at this point. Then he emerges from the cloud of muck and tells us all to surface. So gluing information together from what we learned later on, it actually turns out the police or some other agency had body recovery training in the same lake the same day. When they went for lunch, they stuffed their fully dressed, anatomically correct rubber doll in one of the sunken boats for a few hours for safekeeping. So that didn't turn out to be an actual body, but I still think this would have been super scary. To feel a leg and then another leg in the darkness of the water like that on one of your first dives, I mean, that would be a lot. Maybe I'm just weak because deep sea diving is just not for me, but honestly, that would have scarred me for potentially life, whether the body is real or not. Number 1 on this list is a survivor. Off the coast of Nigeria roughly 8 years ago, a tugboat broke down and sank to the bottom of the ocean. 3 whole days later, a diving crew went out to the wreckage to see what was down there and recover the dead bodies. It was thought that no one could have possibly survived the crash and that all 12 people on the boat were dead. That's why the crew was so shocked when they found someone had actually survived. Maybe this doesn't seem as scary as finding someone who had died, but we're lucky enough to have the actual clip of them recovering this person and just watch as the hand comes out.
Alright, you found one, yeah? He's alive, he's alive.
The startled dive team discovered the tugboat's cook had survived for 3 days.
So that one image of having a hand reach out of the dark and stormy nothing would have actually terrified me. Not to mention that man who survived down there. That would have been 3 days by himself surviving in this tiny air pocket, most likely believing that the world has left you for dead. This is definitely one of those scary discoveries that's for the better, because someone's life was saved, but as the Reddit user Edgar writes, I can't imagine how creepy and unexpected it would be to be on a mission to recover the dead and have a hand reach out to you like it did.
Number 5. Giant isopods. No, this isn't a microscopic picture. This isn't a tick or a bug. This is a giant isopod. One of the scariest looking things picking around the ocean floor. Yeah, I don't know. Imagining this thing wiggling around is enough to already be giving me the willies. Don't worry too much. You're not too likely to find one of these things crawling around your home, as they usually live and feed about 1,600 feet beneath the ocean depths. So you'll have to really go looking for one of these creepy little crawlies. We don't know a lot about isopods, actually. It's difficult to study them in their habitat unbothered deep in the ocean. And also, if I had to guess, I think realistically it's because no one wants to spend any more time looking at one of these little zerglings longer than they have to. Despite their outward appearance, isopods are actually pretty chill. That's the official scientific statement, judging a book by a cover and all that. They're scavengers more than they are predators, waiting at the bottom of the sea for debris to reach them, like discarded bits of meat from crabs or any number of fish which they'll snack on. So basically, they're the moochers of the ocean, waiting for somebody else to do all the work and they'll just clean up the leftovers. It apparently isn't even that big a deal though, because isopods have been observed to be able to go years and years without eating anything at all, with some reports going as far as 5 years without eating anything. I could not even imagine the hanger you would feel through that. Enjoying what we're putting out at Top 5 Scary? Of course you are, that's why you're here. Why not toss a cheeky little subscribe our way as a way of saying thanks? We'll trade you the best scary videos this side of the web in exchange. Number 4. Barreleye Fish. Has anyone ever accused you of being empty-headed? I know that's something I've heard a lot in my time. I don't really know what that means. Unfortunately, my head, hollow as it might be, does not allow you to see inside because I am not a barreleye fish, a being which is cursed to have a window for a forehead. The barreleye fish may be one of the most confusing looking things under the sea. I mean, take a look at this thing. It kind of looks like it's not finished yet, you know? Like this fish was late for school and it forgot to put its face on. It's got its eyes inside its head and has a translucent head to accommodate that. You know, the rest of all life thought eyes on the outside, but the barreleye just had to stand out and be different. Those two big green orbs are the fish's eyes, tinted with a sort of biological sunglasses kind of deal to help it zero in on light above it. The barreleye uses its bizarre eyes to look upwards, tracking the shadows of its prey and then fixating on it. You wouldn't expect a creature that looks this weird to be an effective predator at all. Special organs on the fish's belly called soles deflect light from the creature's insides, illuminating the deep sea around it and also letting it camouflage. So this weirdo transparent head fish is also a mobile swimming light show. Just goes to show how absolutely amazing life down in the abyss is, where creatures will naturally adapt to their surroundings to evolve to have a flashlight built into them. Bless you, barreleye fish. Bless you for being you. Number 3. Sarcastic Fringe Head. At first glance and description, the sarcastic fringe head doesn't sound particularly horrifying. It looks about as funky as most things you would see in an aquarium. And the name might make you wonder a little bit if it's got a reputation for being sassy, like maybe this is the fish that's always backhandedly complimenting you, which would be terrifying in its own right, but not for the reasons we tend to highlight on this channel. No, the sarcastic name comes from the fish's kind of dour expression, and I definitely do see where that's coming from, because looking at photos of me, it looks like it's judging me just a little bit for my life's choices. Now, when this fish opens its mouth, you'll understand why it earned a spot here. The sarcastic fringe head's mouth can open up wider than its body, creating this delightful image you see here, and you will probably be seeing for the rest of your days. Now, if you're a little freaked out looking at this fish that looks like it crawled out of the upside down, that's understandable. But what if I told you that these fish have kiss fights? Sarcastic fringe heads fight for dominance with other fringe heads by expanding their very wide mouths and then pressing them together as a display to show who's got the biggest mouth. This is also how they attract mates, fighting off other fish and smacking their lips together to impress all the lady fringe heads, showing them just how wide their mouths go. And man, it has taken so much restraint right now to be talking about this and trying to keep this at a PG rating. Number 2. Frilled Shark. A frilled shark, all things considered, sounds pretty cute. Maybe you're picturing a shark with lovely frills hanging off of it like some other fish have, like a cool fringe denim jacket. Or maybe you're picturing a shark wearing something lacy and frilly. I'm not gonna judge, you do whatever you'd like. Unfortunately, neither of those fantasies are particularly accurate because like everything else on this list, the frilled shark is an abomination of the ocean. It's already unnerving enough to look at, serving massive alien vibe, the James Cameron kind, not the friendly little gray man kind. And then it opens its mouth and you understand where the name comes from as you're treated to a mouth of 300 thrilled, razor-sharp teeth like barbed wire. Just like the alien, they're able to open their jaws real wide to be able to snarf down prey considerably greater than their size, although exactly how much larger is unknown. These little terrors hunt by swimming around with their maw open and using the darkness to try and lure smaller prey right into a trap before being engulfed by what looks like the world's sharpest car wash. I genuinely can't even look at this thing's mouth for too long without starting to feel a little bit queasy, imagining it biting into anything. The frilled shark is considered a living fossil, much like the coelacanth, because in the 80 million years frilled sharks have been swimming across our planet, they haven't changed much. Like, at all. They more closely resemble prehistoric creatures than any of their contemporary shark counterparts. All that to say is, I guess, whatever nature was cooking with the frilled shark, clearly they got something right. They nailed it if they saw this thing for 80 million years and thought, Absolutely no changes. This one's perfect. Number 1. Colossal squid. At our number 1 spot is a living legend, the colossal squid. Thought for many years to be an urban legend due to their elusive nature, for a long time not much was known about these cephalopods other than the fact that they are very, 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 very large. Reports of giant squids describe them as being anywhere up to a staggering 65 feet long, but collected squids range in at a much more humble 42 feet long. Oh. Okay, well I was getting worked up over nothing. Humans and colossal squids don't particularly cross paths often, what with them living 3,000 feet under the sea. And that is definitely a good thing, because these squids are not something you would ever want to mess with. Its tentacles are lined with sharp hooks to sink into their prey and prevent them from getting away. Alongside the usual suckers that squids' tentacles have, hard, toothy-like rings that dig into prey and keep them wrangled. It's common to find whales covered in these scars, or slashes and shreds from the hook of a giant squid. The thought of being grabbed by these tentacles is enough to stop me from ever ordering calamari again. What with being one of the bigger monsters swimming around down there, the colossal squid doesn't have much in the way of predators. I guess that's kind of one of the benefits of being a 40-foot monstrosity. People stop messing with you, you know? People stop trying to pick on you. They start respecting you more, and no one tries to eat you anymore once you're, you know, bigger than anything else down there.
Number 5, wolverine fish. Hugh Jackman, if you're watching this and you like scary stuff, this first one's for you, my dude. In 2021, there were more than 200 new species of just freshwater fish discovered alone. Just freshwater. Hopefully ancistrous wolverine. Okay, that's a pretty badass name. And a badass looking fish. There's no way in hell I'm taking that thing off of a hook with my hands. Are you kidding me? And you wouldn't want to either, because these fishes have strong lateral curved spikes called endontas tucked underneath their gills, which at any time they can extend and jab at their prey with these spiky prong-like claws, hence the name. For those of you who don't know Wolverine, he's an X-Men with claws. It kind of goes hand in hand here, you know? The wolverine fish is actually a catfish, however, that grows up to only about 6 or 7 inches long. They get their name from both the barbed razor-sharp prongs associated with them and the temper and aggression inside of them. Yeah, so like full-blown Wolverine-style anger. Luckily for us, they live in between rocks found so far in the Brazilian river of Rio Xingu in the lower Amazon that I don't think you're gonna swim into any one of these soon. I feel like that's where the scariest fish are, the Amazon. Also, kind of confusing biologists, so many species and names alike but not alike. Catfish, wolf fish, half wolf, half man, X-Men fish. Like every day there's a new fish. Wolverine fish are only herbivores and graze on algae and detritus tucked away deep under rocks, so the likelihood of you just like stepping on one of these are pretty low. Might scare you away from their home, but they won't eat you. Just don't go flipping over any rocks and reaching underneath murky water in the Amazon. That's all I can say for this one. Number 4, alien fish? Well, one magnificent alien fish, Advena magnifica, which translates to magnificent alien, hence the name. No, it's not from outer space or anything, don't panic. Technically, it's not even a fish. This sea sponge literally gets its name because it just looks like E.T. Hey, I didn't name it, they did. To be fair, it does look like E.T. the alien, come on. The long neck, the huge head, the big eyes, it's literally perfect. This year, a new sea sponge was discovered officially. Well, plucked back in 2017, but they're sure now that it's a completely new species. Over 6,000 feet deep in the Pacific Ocean, research team from the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History came upon a mesmerizing seascape. Dr. Chris Ma of the team dubbed the scene, quote, a forest of the weird. The sea sponge rises up from the seafloor to look exactly onto the direction of the current, mouth open, hoping to swallow up some bacteria to eat. That's sick, just an alien sponge sticking their ET heads out, catching the breeze, hoping for some fast food. Doesn't sound like a bad gig. The 2 holes of the sponge that give it its signature ET eyes appearance are clearly visible on the outside of its head. These holes, technically oscules, serve as openings of which the sponge pumps water out of. The sponge is covered in even tinier pores where the water is drawn into the sponge along with tasty bacteria and other small prey. Just sucked in through small chambers and the water's pumped out through a bunch of canals. Cristiana Casello Branco, the researcher who found this deep-sea gray, explains the importance of this discovery by saying, quote, "As all of these organisms are intricately connected, by documenting and describing marine biodiversity, we are building a better understanding of life and the impact of humans on Earth." Yeah, 100% we're all connected. Let's give these little dudes some clean water. How about that, people, all right? No more Mountain Dew bottles just thrown into the lake. Pick it up. Number 3, bulldog fish. Catfish, wolverine fish, now bulldog fish. When are we just gonna have a fish, you know? The bulldog fish, or the Xenactinus oryx. That sounds like a Decepticon, doesn't it? Xenactinus oryx? Roll out. Well, it's Autobots. Never mind. This thing can truly teach a new dog some old tricks. Like 90 million years old tricks, because our newest discovery is actually a really, really old one. Extinct, thankfully. You wouldn't want to haul this thing up in your net. The Dino of the Week blog states that some of the longest bulldog fish ever may have once even measured up to 6 meters long. Yeah, that's like a regular sized shark. The bulldog fish fossils may be quite valuable as well. A fully intact, complete framed specimen sold for about $110,000 at Sotheby's auction house. Is this the reason fish and chips are so expensive nowadays? Like, what's going on here? This scary dude roamed the warm, shallow waters of the Western Interior Seaway that split America in 2 halves during the Upper Cretaceous period. Distinguished by their heavy, bony skull and armed to the tooth with teeth like a nightmare, last year, Andy Moore, a local fisherman, made a discovery while taking part in a fishing competition in Nebraska. When he brought his kayak over to free his line, he first thought that it was a skeleton of something that had recently died, so he just returned back to his tournament. He contacted the sheriff's department after the tournament, worried, and they got back to him saying it was his lucky day. Dude, imagine just reeling in a 90 million year old fish during a fishing tournament. Like, I hope he won. That's definitely first place, isn't it? Oh, Andy? Oh yeah, caught a 90 millioner, yeah. Number 2, the barreleye fish. Tubular eyes, bro. No, seriously, your tubular eyes actually are very rare and also significantly puzzling. Say hello to the barreleye fish, or the Macropina microstoma from the Opisthoproctus species, meaning backwards in Greek, to signify their uniquely designed flipped up eyes luminously inside alive in their head, or backwards. Generally directed upwards and back to detect the silhouettes of both predator and prey, although they can move their eyes back to forward. Basically, they have a sunroof above their head that they can look up from inside their own head. Hey, that's pretty tubular, bruh. They can be found deep in tropical waters in the twilight zone, between 600 and 800 meters down. There are fish that gaze upwards through their transparent heads with eyes like mesmerizing emerald orbs. These domes are huge spherical lenses that sit on a pair of long silvery eye tubes, hence its common name. The barreleye fish has a green tint over their eyes, which even acts as kind of like a sunglasses to help them track down prey in any sort of lighting. There is literally nowhere to hide, even for a bioluminescent fish. Barreleyes are one step ahead the entire time. After years of only seeing dead, net-caught specimens, in 2021, Bruce Robinson with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute in California and their high-def cameras finally got a pretty good look at these dudes using remotely operated vehicles. Dude, these are apparently really rare. Side note, is this how fish are evolving? Like their heads are becoming see-through all of a sudden? Because this is terrifying. Like, imagine a shark with a sunroof. Number 1, the snapping shrimp. This little guy, the snapping shrimp, aka the pistol shrimp, aka mussel in the alphidae family. Sounds like a mafia family, doesn't it? Hey, I'm a pistol shrimp with the alphidae family, who's asking? This little thing can literally create a sonic boom under the water right before and as it's attacking you. That's not scary at all. It's so fast you literally don't even know what's happening due to the stun alone and how fast it is. You won't see it coming, you might hear it coming. This thing's sound is that big, it creates a sonic boom. We know nothing, Jon Snow. Like, they're apparently found in coral reefs and oyster reefs. These pistol shrimp hit their prey at over 100 kilometers per hour. In doing so, a large air bubble is created, and because this Mike Tyson shrimp is so quick with the jab, the following pop is around 200 decibels. It has a punching hand and a claw hand, like a jab and a cross. The sound stuns their prey first and resembles sticks breaking or cracking of a knuckle under the water. But don't panic, not in any lakes or freshwater, they live in tropical seas. They're usually muddy green or orange in color, usually only about that big. Scientists found that actual light is produced when the bubble pops due to the high temperature and pressure under the water. They're the only ones so far that can do this. I mean, this is pretty sick. And also pretty terrifying. The knowledge that fish are starting to learn how to flashbang other fish like they're clearing a room in Call of Duty. Dude, that's where I draw the line. I'm not going swimming anymore at all. Number 5. Rose-veiled fairy wrasse. The sea Finiphenma was spotted by John Randall in the early 1990s and was initially thought to be just an adult version of C. rubris quamus, a fish from the Maldives. However, just a couple months ago, a new strain of species was finally caught and analyzed. Though there have been hundreds of fish caught off the coast of the Maldives, this colorful, mesmerizing new addition is the first ever to be formally introduced and recognized as a brand new species. Alright. Welcome to Earth, little buddy. I love this planet. Every day there's something new, eh? This thing is mesmerizing, right? Look at it, it's just so beautiful. Apparently it changes colors as it grows up too. Different year, different color. The rose-veiled fairy wrasses is one of the first species to have its name derived from the local Dhivehi language, with Finiphenma meaning rose, a nod to both its beautiful pink hues and the island's national flower. Ah, we're starting this list off nice and easy. Imagine swimming with these. This is beautiful. Nice little rainbow around you. Of course, us being us, the species being so new and abundant has started making it, of course, at high risk of over-exploitation. Yeah, don't forget what we do to fish. Yeah, humans can be the worst for this planet also. Already talks of commercialization, tasty new dishes, and exotic deep-sea tanks before it's even got a scientific name. That should be a metaphor about how we are, you know? Something so new and precious and we're already craving over it. The beauty of nature, I guess. The discovery is part of the California Academies of Science Hope for Reefs initiative started in 2016 by a team of marine biologists and deep-sea divers. It was created to explore, explain, and sustain the world's coral reefs by making fundamental breakthroughs in coral reef biology. That's awesome, dude. Okay, so there's like some pure people still out there trying to help. That's beautiful. Alright, one for humanity. Okay, we're trying here. Number 4, the blanket octopus. The blanket octopus gets its name from its female counterpart, the very rarely seen and supersized female blanket octopus. She has a long fleshy cape that wraps around her tentacles. This cape makes the octopus appear larger and more intimidating to predators. Though the female blanket octopus is already large, growing to around 2.5 meters in length, the males only grow up to about 1 inch, weighing in at a monstrous 1 pound. Alright. The caped female growing upwards of 40% bigger in mass and size. 40% his size. Okay, this species is much more interesting now. 40 times bigger than its counterpart? Just a little guy, you know? You got this, little man. That's like us dating a sperm whale. How does he not get lost in that big cape? Hey, soulmates are soulmates, right? In fact, the blanket octopus exhibit one of the most extreme sexual size dimorphisms known in any of the animal kingdoms. That's a really cool fact. Unique love, you know? That's like Donkey and Dragon from Shrek. But on a bleaker note, unfortunately scientists don't think that they live very long. Sad, I know. Like many other octopuses, they are short-lived at approximately 1 to 2 years for females and 3 to 4 years as males. The tiny male drifts through the ocean seeking a mate while protecting their precious reproductive arm tucked away in a sac between their mouth and eye. Males die soon after they mate, while females will continue to live and grow for many months and years longer than the males, spawning around 100,000 eggs which are carried by her under her arms. Blanket octopuses can be found in both tropical and subtropical waters. They apparently are reported to feed on seafloor mollusks and small fishes. It's not fish, eh? Yeah, it's fishes. Yeah, I never knew that. It's fishes. I like that. Blanket octopuses are also immune to venom, like from the Portuguese man of war, the huge jellyfish. Female blankets actually rip their limbs off and use them as weapons. They use the tentacles of jellyfish to sting other predators for both offense and defense. This is like my new favorite animal. These should be called Joan of Arcs, because that's like the energy I'm getting here. When threatened, the female unfurls her large net-like membranes that spread out like Batman's cape, making her instantly 3 times the size of an already 12-foot body. Gentle giant or limb ripper-offer? You tell me. Number 3, the glass octopus. A rare encounter with a glass octopus has just happened, which is one of the strangest and coolest species that swim these oceans. These science fiction looking dudes have transparent gelatinous bodies, and scientists believe that they have evolved into their elongated shape in order to make itself next to invisible, even when right beside it. That's pretty cool. The only colorful parts on them are their optic nerves, eyeballs, and digestive tract. Yeah, basically like a see-through Game Boy. Remember those? About like 3 times the size of a Game Boy 2 at about 20 inches long. It's likely that these octopuses eat whatever is down there at the depths of the Twilight Zone and Midnight Zone. Yeah, like deep, deep. And cold. Footage of the glass octopus is super new, and before this expedition, scientists had almost no documentation of the animal in the wild. That means they've mostly had to learn about it just by studying remains found in the guts of other predators. But now, thanks to the Schmidt Ocean Institute armed with close-range, high-def videos and pictures, scientists and biologists are now able to learn a little bit more about this mysterious, ghostly creature. Quote, "The ocean holds wonders and promises we haven't even imagined, much less discovered." Wendy Schmidt, co-founder of Schmidt Ocean Institute. Thanks to a recent expedition in the US Pacific remote islands, the Schmidts led a 34-day trip that brought scientists together from all around the world to document deep-sea creatures on deep seamounts. See, this is what I'm talking about. All the while using a remote-controlled vehicle named Sebastian. I love it. I get it, Little Mermaid, I got you. Scientists observed not 1 but 2 octopuses, adding further to more knowledge and behavior of this elusive species. The glass octopus is considered one of the least studied cephalopods in our ocean. I'm excited. Let's go 2022. So far so good. Great year for fishes. Number 2, the colossal squid. Sometimes called the Antarctic squid or giant cranch squid, or famously known as the Kraken. It's believed to be the largest squid species ever. It's the only member of the Mesonychothelius genus and is only known from a handful of sightings throughout history. Ah yes, the old sea captain's log, huh? The species is confirmed to reach a mass of at least 1,500 pounds, making it the largest known invertebrate on the planet. Biggest one so far is 20 meters. That's like the pitcher's mound to home plate. Yeah. This thing is massive. Though the species has similar anatomy to other squids, it's the only member to display hooks on its arms and tentacles. Okay, that's a little scary. It lives in the Antarctic and is found at depths of the Twilight Zone, like 2,000 meters down. Little is actually known about the creature, what it eats, and what it does all the way down there. Scientists say it's bioluminescence as well, which attracts prey. Look, if this thing was flying instead of swimming, just 1 atmosphere difference, I'm just gonna say it, this thing would be an alien. You know what I mean? I said it. I mean, no wonder it's got a reputation for swallowing up ships by pirates. The first specimens were spotted in 1925, but in the early 2000s, fishermen got lucky and they pulled up the largest colossal squid ever found. It's now on display at the Museum of New Zealand. Kind of sad that when we see these beautiful things, the first thing we think is to yank them out of the water. I like the underwater cameras and freedivers Blue Planet style, just swimming down there with krakens. Okay, maybe not. Yank it up, boys. Get it up, that thing's horrifying. And the number 1 spot, the blood belly comb jelly. Sounds like a magical elixir. From the family Lampictenidae, this specimen was first caught and studied by George Matsumoto, the marine biologist at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, who discovered the blood belly jelly in 2003. Now we're sure these things weren't discovered on like one of Jupiter's moons or something already in the 30s. We're sure of that. Cause that thing's blinking like a you-know-what. Not many of these things have actually been caught though. I've never seen anything like this before. Brilliant and then seemingly electric. The bloody belly comb jelly comes in different shades of red as well. The sparkling display on the outside comes from light reflecting and refracting off tiny transparent hair-like cilia. Basically this thing is like a swimming light bright. Remember those light brights from the 90s? This thing is like the alive version of that. Of course, alongside its mystic nature, it also poops sparkles. Seriously, like a little alien unicorn. That's neat, right? Its name comes from its ruby red color. While it's pretty much invisible from underneath its belly, from above and in front it lights up like the 4th of July, luring predators in with its mesmerizing patterns. Red is nearly invisible in the deep sea, so the vibrant crimson that gives the comb jelly its name is actually helping it hide. Bloodbellies are technically ctenophores, not true jellyfish. Many comb jellies have caloblasts lining their tentacles, which work like glue instead of venom. Upon touch, a spiral filament automatically bursts out and releases this sticky glue stuff. Once a fish is unable to swim away, the comb jelly reels in its tentacles and brings the food to its mouth. Okay, so this thing just became absolutely terrifying again. The deep dark sea, we gotta respect it. How insects and how jellyfish eat scares the out of me. I can't explain it. Watch it for yourself. Number 5, the frilled shark. Chlamydoslacus ingenius and Chlamydoslacus africana, or better known as the frilled shark and the frilled South African shark, are the 2 extinct species of shark that swam our oceans. Thank gosh. Well, actually, still kinda do. The frilled shark is considered a living fossil, not just its age and time spent surfing the coast, due to its primitive eel-like physical trait, the brown color, the jaws, 8-foot body, and the way its fins, spine, and head move under the water are common in ancient serpents and water creatures. So this thing is like an eel-serpent-shark hybrid. Yeah. Little jarring. Commonly referred to simply as the frilled shark because of its 6 pairs of gill slits at its throat. It swims amongst the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans, usually in deep, dark, murky waters of the outer continental shelf and upper continental slope. These deep dive sharks usually live and sleep near the ocean floor. Okay, that's a good sign, of course. They live on a diet of cephalopods, smaller sharks, and even swim to the surface at night to feed what's floating atop on the surface. When hunting, the frilled shark moves like an eel, bending and slithering to swallow prey with its long and flexible jaws, which are equipped with 300 rows of recurved, needle-like teeth. So am I just gonna like snorkel into one of these things any day now? Well, good thing is they're really hard to find. Like, really hard. Usually caught by accident in commercial fishing nets, usually at depths anywhere between 50 and 1,000 meters. So unless you're free diving at night, you should be okay. Yeah, they like it deep and dark. I'd say these things are already scarier than the Meg. It's like a shark but an eel-snake hybrid with a shark head and shark-size teeth. That sounds a bit scarier. Well, I mean the Meg preferred warmer, shallower waters, so maybe this one's a tie. I don't know who's snorkeling 2 miles deep, but it's certainly not me, okay? In my opinion, I'd take a large great white over this dinosaur-looking thing slithering after me any day. Number 4, the fang-toothed fish. Ah yes, the Anoplogaster cornuta, or commonly known as the fang-tooth. I wonder why. Though they spend most of their time in the deep, common fangtooths are known to migrate towards the surface at night. Sorry, the fangtooths are known to migrate towards the surface at night. That is the scariest sentence I've ever said. Dude, these are way scarier than this giant ancient shark. Like, all the scariest things come out at night, you notice that? And root canals, but they're usually done during the day. The word megalodon is Greek words meaning giant tooth. I'd take big teeth over this thing chasing me around any day. Thankfully though, this guy is only about a foot in length. Okay, that's not so bad. The fish has a mouth that are full of long snake teeth, perfect for hanging on to its prey as they shake. The lockable jaws ensure that, although thrashing may occur, the fangtooth's teeth are locked clamps that effortlessly swim with dinner in its mouth, just getting dragged deeper and deeper down, wiggling and can't move, trying to run for their lives. Well, swim for their lives. And fish of any size. I'm sorry? Yep. Any size. Common fangtooths have been recorded at depths of about 5,000 meters, so whatever lives down there, it's game on. Look at this thing. I was scared of sunfish and seaweed brushing up against my legs. This thing swimming by me, this thing? It looks like a night terror in itself, stalking their preferred prey of crustaceans and of course, other fishes the same size. Common fangtooths are more active than many other deep sea fish and seek out food for meal and sport rather than being purely ambush predators eating when they're hungry. That's terrifying. Packing up for the long winter, huh? Their huge mouth and very long teeth ensure that they are able to attack prey and actually hold on while they relocate them to a deeper, darker spot where they can kind of take their time on the meal. I've swam with sharks. In my opinion, this thing's way scarier. Like, eating small critters running around the ocean floor, sure, but also imagine eating something the same size of itself with teeth? No problem? Slowly devouring it, bite by bite? Yeah, that's way scarier. Come on. Just reattaching itself every bite? Taking you along for the free ride? Yeah, that's horrifying. And number 3, the big fin squid. Of the genus Magnapinidae family, the big fin squid, or as I like to call it, this ocean alien with shoulders, belongs to a group of rarely seen cephalopods with a distinctive morphology, meaning they're really weird and rare. Magnapini meaning big fin, of course. The first record of us catching and looking at this family comes from a specimen talismani caught off the Azores in 1907. This was our first look at this bizarre fish, but due to the damaged nature of the find, little information could be extracted and was classified just as a squid. The problem is when you pull these things out of its atmosphere, it just looks like a piece of wet crinoline dress all of a sudden. Don't get the whole terrifying effect, you know? In 1956, a similar squid was caught in the South Atlantic, but during the 80s, 2 specimens were found in the Atlantic, then 3 more were found in the Pacific, and eventually the creatures found a place amongst the books as its own species, entering the family Magnapinidae. Squids. Okay, so it's not actually a squid, but loosely related. Like a third cousin of maybe alien origin. This thing looks like it crashed here on an asteroid, I'm just gonna say it, doesn't it? Like there's only 12 of these. Not many. The arms and tentacles are the same length. The appendages are also huge and held perpendicular to the body, creating the appearance of a illusion of arms and elbows, giving its trademark alien figure. Most remarkable is the length of the elastic tentacles, which has been estimated around 20 to 30 times its mass and length. Deep sea video evidence puts the total length of the largest specimens at 10 meters long. Yeah, that's 2 trucks. Close-ups of the body and head show us that the fins are extremely large, being proportionately nearly as big as those of a big fin squid. Hence, the comparison. While they do appear similar, no specimens or samples of the adults have been taken out of the water yet, leaving their exact identity, bodily functions, and internal organs a mystery. Awesome. Yes, more mysteries under the water. Alright, I only had really bad night terrors already. Let's just add this in there. Yeah, I'd take a shark swimming with a brain at me rather than this alien thing swimming up to me and just staring at me, trying to understand me for about an hour. Terrifying. Number 2, the gulper eel. Eurypharynx pelicanoides. The pelican eel, or what I just said, is basically a deep sea eel. Like deep sea. If you've seen the Ridley Scott's Alien film franchise or the Predator universe, you'll know that this thing looks exactly like that. Yeah, am I wrong? But instead of like 8 feet tall, it's only 3 feet tall. Yeah, still terrifying. The pelican eel has been described by many synonyms, yet nobody has been able to demonstrate that more than one species of pelican eel exists. Riding solo, huh? That's creepy. One of a kind kinda deal. It's also commonly known as the gulper eel, or umbrella mouth gulper eel, due to its terrifying size and function of its mouth. The mouth and jaws resemble a pelican's gulp, hence the name. The morphology of the pelican eel can be difficult to describe because they're so fragile and oddly shaped that they become damaged when they're pulled out of the deep sea's immense pressure. We can't just swim all the way down there and take pictures, you know? The pelican eel's most notable feature, its mouth, which is much larger than its body, like 5 times the size. The mouth is loosely hinged and can be opened wide enough to swallow a fish 3 times its size. This thing has like a lower mandible of a python, just like unhinging it before dinner. The lower jaw is hinged at the base of the head with no body mass behind it, making the head look abysmally huge. It's basically a swimming mouth with a spine, tail, and I think a brain? Yeah, we don't really know yet. With dot-sized eyes, yeah. It usually is always moving too, rarely stationary. It hunts in some sort of folded state. The pelican eel's mouth has the capability to change to an inflated shape when hunting, giving the mouth its notably massive appearance. Dude, the mouth unfolds like the James Webb telescope. Like 100 working parts. Technically, it's like a geometric shape unfolding as a mouth, followed by stretching, like a cootie catcher. Remember those? This thing eats like a cootie catcher. When the pelican eel is in pursuit of its prey, it slowly starts unfolding itself. Imagine this thing's trucking behind you, unhinging its jaw, slowly the closer it gets. The head and jaw structure unfold and spread horizontally, not vertically. Okay, that's scarier all of a sudden. The unspreading event, or as I like to call it, lunch, is followed by the inflation of the mouth from the stretchable skin of the head, which it feeds on prey. Then, water's expelled via the gills. Okay, so it's basically a large strainer, and after it eats, it blows itself out, releases all the water back into the water. Just wrings itself out. Come on, this thing is horrifying. Thank gosh it only eats crustaceans and creepy little crawlies on the bottom seafloor. And number 1, the phantom jellyfish. Stygiomedusa gigantea. I love that word. Commonly known as the giant phantom jellyfish, is a part of the monotypic genus of deep sea jellyfish. Stygiomedusa. With only around 110 sightings in 110 years, it's a jellyfish that is rarely seen. Well, I guess like once a year. I don't know, I'm not really good at math. Believed to be widespread throughout the world, it thrives in all oceans and seas, with the exception of the Arctic Ocean. Yeah, a little too cold for it. The Monterey Bay Aquarium remotely operated underwater vehicles have only sighted the beast 27 times in 27 years. Dude, what's with all the matching numbers? Is this CIA run? A study conducted by the Journal of the Marine Biological Association of the UK revealed info regarding the species and had this to say. The Gigantea is thought to be one of the largest invertebrate predators on this planet. One more time please. The largest predator. It is commonly found in the ocean's midnight zone, reaching depths of about 7,000 meters. Deepest human free dive is about 300 meters. Okay. Yeah, we're good. Unless you have a wide lung span. The largest predators in the deep sea, the giant phantom jellyfish's typical prey consists of plankton and small fish. Whew. The S. gigantea tends to be dominant in locations with a low productivity system, meaning it deters other predators of fish, like it likes it quiet. A shy eater, I'd say. However, when this thing is hungry, it battles squids, eels, and even whales. Okay, never mind. Just when I thought this thing was really cute, it fights off whales for food. The first specimen, weighing in at 100 pounds, was collected in 1899, but it wasn't recognized as its own species until 1959. Imagine this thing chasing you and catching you, tangling you in like 100 feet of netting tentacles so it can just eat you slowly. Does this thing have a consciousness? Like, you can kind of tell if a shark is swimming near or close to you or what it's kind of feeling. This thing just slowly, softly swimming towards you before it ingests you? Way scarier. Like, I'm convinced these landed here. The oceans are way scarier than things on land. We haven't even started to uncover the whole ecosystem yet.
Starting off this countdown, we have the lamprey. The lamprey looks like something you would see in your nightmares. It looks like a mix between a snake, eel, and leech. They can be anywhere from 5 to 40 inches in length, and they attack fish by sucking the life out of them. Lampreys have 11 or 12 rows of teeth that wrap around in their mouth like a ring. Once they latch onto their victims, they use their barbed tongue to pierce the fish and drain it of its blood. They also excrete a blood thinner to prevent blood clotting. What's scary is in the past they have been known to attack swimmers. But don't worry, their bites aren't deadly to humans, but still I don't want one of those things latching onto me. No, thank you. Now, these things are found in multiple environments. They live in saltwater, freshwater, lakes or rivers, shallow or deep. They can survive in every environment. In fact, the Great Lakes are being invaded by them. In the early 20th century, they got to Lake Ontario and Lake Erie via shipping canals, and within a decade they managed to infest all 5 Great Lakes. What's particularly scary is that one lamprey kills about 40 pounds of fish every year. Those things are bloodthirsty. Coming in at number 4, we have tardigrades. When I first saw this thing, I was like, that's no way that's real. It looks like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland or something like that. So these creatures are often called water bears or moss piglets, and if you look at the photos of them, you'll see why. They got some plumpalicious bodies. So these creatures have 8 legs and hands with 4 to 8 claws on each. I mean, they kinda look cute in like a weird messed up way, but they're definitely not. There's something weird about them. They got this weird mouth with sharp teeth that extend outwards, allowing them to suck out nutrients from plants and microorganisms. And these things are almost indestructible. They can even survive in outer space. These things have been found from deep seas to even sand dunes. If an apocalypse happened, they would still be floating around in the ocean. Like, they can go up to 30 years without food or water, and can survive in both absolute zero or above boiling temperatures. Now, these things are pretty small, which makes them less terrifying. They range from 0.05 millimeters to 1.2 millimeters in size. Now, although they look squishy, they are actually covered in a tough cuticle, which they shed in order to grow. So yes, it's small and chubby looking, but there's just something about it that makes it so unsettling. In our 3rd spot, we have the viper fish. One of my biggest fears while swimming in the ocean is when my leg touches something that I can't see. Like, it's just immediate panic for me. I don't know what it is. It could be a garbage bag for all I know, but to me it feels like a slimy tentacle that can grab me and pull me underwater. Now, I'm mentioning this because this creature's color is so dark that it makes it virtually invisible in the depths of the ocean. So divers could be out exploring and not even know that this creature is lurking right next to them. So the viper fish can be anywhere from 30 to 60 centimeters in size, and it has a large mouth with needle-like teeth. They also have very creepy, beady little eyes. But what's interesting is that these fish actually can see in color, so that's just a little fun fact. Now, you don't want to get too close to these guys if you can help it, because they're considered one of the fiercest predators of the deep, and they have very big stomachs, so they can take down a lot more than they look like they are capable of. Moving on to number 2, we have the sarcastic fringe head. Okay, so like, I'm picturing a fish with like bad bangs that goes like, oh wow, I'm so impressed, blub blub. That would be funny. But no, this thing is highly highly aggressive. So this fish lives in the Pacific waters off the coast of North America. What they like to do is hide out in an area that covers them completely, and then they just stay there and stalk their prey. When anything comes close to it, it launches out and attacks them. Now, what makes them so terrifying are their Demogorgon-type flaps around their face that open up to make them look intimidating. Either that, or it kind of looks like the poison-spitting dinosaur from Jurassic Park. Anyways, it uses this creepy mouth to attack its prey. Now, these things are scared of nothing. They are known to attack creatures way bigger than them. In fact, there's one video of a fringe head swallowing a whole damn octopus. And what's worse is that they have been known to attack divers. If they can take down a massive octopus, just think about what they could do to us. In fact, divers have shared stories of their encounters with this fish, and it ain't pretty. They will latch onto you and refuse to let go. And in our #1 spot, we have the goblin shark. If you thought that last creature was bad, wait till I tell you about this one. So the goblin shark is referred to as a living fossil. This is due to the fact that it was thought to have gone extinct millions of years ago. But in 1898, a goblin shark was spotted off the coast of Japan. Researchers realized that the shark was indeed still alive, and in fact, it barely changed over time. It looked like it just never evolved. So these creatures can grow 12 feet long and can weigh up to 460 pounds. It was thought that 13 feet was the biggest they could grow, but in 2000 they found a giant goblin shark that was 20 feet long. So now researchers say that they have no real idea about how big they can truly get. Now, this thing has one of the creepiest looking faces. It's got a super long nose with weird Voldemort nostrils, pink flesh making it look like it was skinned alive, and of course it's got some weird sharp teeth. Oh, but it gets worse. These sharks don't hunt their prey down. Instead, they wait for their prey to come to them. They just chill in the water, and when a fish gets close to them, they launch their jaws out and clamp down right on them. Yeah. Their top and bottom teeth are attached to ligaments, so it can reach out and extend its mouth to grab its prey. And its mouth moves decently fast. It can launch out at about 10.1 feet per second, and its mouth opens super wide. It can open at a 111-degree angle, so its prey stand no chance. They think they're safe, then all of a sudden they are swallowed whole by this monster.
Number 5 on this list is a giant eel. This is a true story that comes in from a Reddit user, RCMW181. They write, an old World War II ammunition ship off the south coast of England was full of brass-topped shells. Most had been taken by divers over the years, and it was now very rare to see them apart from a pile in one corner of the ship. The pile of shiny brass metals was miraculously untouched and remarkably clean after spending years underwater, and you only found out why if you swam near them. Out of the murky darkness, the largest eel I have ever seen snakes forward. Without exaggeration, this thing had a head the same size as a horse's head, full of jagged teeth. I could not see the body as it looped into the dark and deeper into the ship. No one got near those shells. Turns out for years this thing had been guarding the shiny brass shells, slithering over them, making them shine. We found out at a bar later that he was famous in the area, and many people went to the wreck just to see him. No idea why this giant creature was guarding them like a dragon and its horde, but some said eels are like magpies and like shiny things. There are multiple scary discoveries in this story in my opinion. First off, our Reddit user just glosses over the fact that they're in a sunken World War II munitions ship. They don't say so, but I would have imagined that people would have died on that ship when it sunk, and there may have even been some remains of the dead still down there. Then to come face to face with a giant eel that is extremely protective over these brass shells would be terrifying. If that was a giant moray eel, then those creatures can grow up to 2.5 meters in length and can be very deadly in the water. Had that creature interpreted what our diver was doing as threatening, then they may not have made it to shore later that day to be able to share the story. Number 4 on this list is a freezer. This story from a Reddit user is just all kinds of creepy. Count_Dynamo writes, I've done a number of dives, and the strangest thing I ever saw was a large deep freezer with a heavy industrial chain wrapped around multiple times with about 5 cinder blocks attached. It was very rusted, and the deep freezer itself had to have been 30 years old, probably more. This was about 90 feet just off off of Vancouver Island, Canada. The situation gave myself and the other divers the heebie-jeebies. Logged the GPS and depth coordinates and notified the police. We were able to find out what was inside since one of the divers had friends with the local police. 10 porcelain dolls. Now for starters, I'm actually kind of happy that they found porcelain dolls inside that freezer, because when I was initially reading that story and heard about a freezer that was locked up and weighed down, I initially thought of a dead body. But having 10 porcelain dolls raises a lot of questions. Were these dolls potentially cursed and that was the only way to get rid of them? If you've ever come in contact with a cursed doll, then locking it up is the first thing to do. Ed and Lorraine prove it with their handling of the Annabelle doll. If these dolls are cursed though, then this discovery gets even more scary. Clearly, whoever locked them in that freezer threw them to the bottom of the ocean and didn't want them to be found. Bringing them back up to the surface probably wasn't the best idea. Number 3 on this list is a color change. Now, a color change doesn't really sound that scary at all, but in this particular case, it's definitely pretty creepy. A diver writes, I was diving off the coast of Fiji and we went through a natural tunnel, like a 10-meter cave/passage through a rock formation. So we start swimming through the cave and suddenly the light was weird, like the blue tint from the water has been replaced by a red one. Now all divers will know that this isn't only weird because the color changed, but also because red is the first color to disappear after a certain depth, usually between 30 to 40 feet, and we were well over 70 feet. Also bear in mind this was late morning on a sunny day. So imagine this scene. Me and my dive buddy are going through an underwater cave and suddenly everything, for no apparent reason, is tinted red, a color that you were literally supposed to be unable to see while diving at that depth during the day. Upon exiting the cave, everything was back to blue. I thought it was just me, so I didn't signal to go back up. After the dive, my buddy asked me if I'd seen the water tint red as well. We can't explain it, and the folks from the local dive shop had no idea what we were talking about. Now that story is super weird. We've got to keep in mind that these guys were 70 feet below the surface at that point. If I was 70 feet below the surface and everything changed colors to a deep red, I would be very scared for my life. Obviously we don't know for sure, but it sounds like that cave that they stumbled upon is haunted by something. It's either haunted by something or that particular cave can produce some strange light phenomenon. Either way, it would have been very frightening, and I'm glad that the 2 divers in this story made it out okay. Number 2 on this list is a school of sharks. The next discovery comes in from a professional diver in the Bahamas who was diving down to recover a dead body. What's crazy about this story is that the dead body isn't the scary part. His online name is Keith Ba, and he writes, after an hour or 2 of searching, I went back into the blue hole to see if there were any signs of him. Saw the glint of his watch and his arm sticking out near the bottom. Started descending down to the bottom to recover the body. On the way down, realized that the bottom was a school of sharks that must have been there for breeding. So many sharks that they blocked the view of the actual bottom. Descended into darkness, grabbed his arm, couldn't stand to look at the body, and started ascending. The sharks followed and were circling around the both of us. Had to take a break at halfway at around 60 feet as to not get the bends. Extremely scared. The entire time waiting to normalize being super scared. Victim was struck by a passing boat. So not only is finding a dead body underwater super scary in my opinion, but to stumble upon so many sharks that you can't even see the bottom of the ocean, that's beyond terrifying. Then to have said sharks follow you up to the surface, deciding whether or not they're going to eat you, would have been absolutely brutal. He didn't specify what type of sharks they were, but after doing some research, sharks tend to get far more aggressive during mating, and therefore the risk of our divers getting attacked is significantly increased. Also, the number of sharks that can gather during mating season can rise into the hundreds. One shark is scary enough and will likely win in a fight, but tens to even hundreds of them would have easily had their way with this diver. Not sure about you guys, but if that was me, I would be exclusively a land dweller from then on out. Number 1 on this list is a person. People aren't typically scary discoveries, but in this case by some deep sea divers, it definitely was. One diver writes, me and 2 buddies were on a night dive in the Puget Sound hunting prawns. It was about 1 AM and we're a good 100 feet deep, the darkest black you could imagine. We used to do this thing on night dives where we'd get in a circle, turn off our lights, then stir up the water and watch the bioluminescence float around us like floating stars in a black watery space. Only this time, we turn off our lights, stir up the water, and the water glows just enough to reveal a fourth person sitting in our circle. We were at a dive resort, so it wasn't so odd to see another diver, only it was 1 AM and we'd see nobody else prepping a dive at the dock. He was also alone, which was odd considering the dangerous conditions of a night dive in those waters, and he had no fins or gloves. I don't know how he swam so well without fins or didn't get hypothermia without boots or gloves. We wore dry suits because it was so cold, but this dude was in a wetsuit with exposed skin. We thought we saw a giant gash on one of his legs. So the three of us all notice him and we're too scared to move. I can hear my buddies panting in their regs and the guy just smiles, waves, and then swims away. Whenever you think you're alone and someone just shows up like in an alley at night, it's weird. 100 feet underwater at night is terrifying. After reading this story, I got some serious ghost vibes. Now obviously I can't know for sure and those divers didn't either, but this man just appeared out of nowhere and had a giant gash on his leg. He also wasn't wearing the proper gear and they didn't see him enter the water when they were getting ready to go. Potentially, rather than just be another diver out and about, this is the ghost of someone who went diving and died. Now their spirit just swims through the ocean for eternity. I've read a lot of ghost stories and reports of sightings before, and that has all the telltale signs of one.
Kicking off at number 5, the Caleuche. And for this first foray into these particular ghost ships that haunt the sea, we're going to be heading over to the mythologies of Chile and the many legends that have been built around its coastal landscape. One of those, according to Chilean legend, is that of the Caleuche, a large ghost ship that sails the seas of Chiloé, a small island just off the coast, where it only ever appears at night. The ship itself is said to appear as beautiful, cast in a bright white light, an enormous vessel with 3 masts and 5 sails each. It is said that when the Caleuche appears, it is always at night and always full of lights with the sounds of a great party and a feast on board. Quickly though, it disappears, plunging back beneath the murky depths. Interestingly enough though, although this vessel is said to be similar to the Flying Dutchman, there is a boatload of mythology relating to this particular legend. One of these versions claims that the vessel is crewed by the drowned, souls lost at sea who are brought to the ship by 3 mythological figures in Chilean legend. 2 sisters, one of them the Sirena Charlotta, a type of mermaid, and the other the Pincoya, a type of water spirit said to protect the Chilean coast. And then their brother, the Pincoy, their male counterpart, who has the body of a sea lion. It's pretty cool. Once aboard, the perished souls can resume their existence in an eternal reverie of adventure on the high seas. However, there is a much more sinister version of this legend, which states that the crew of the Caleuche instead sailed the Chiloé archipelago, luring fishermen and sailors toward it with an enchanting music to enslave them as part of their crew for eternity, where they are twisted and then contorted and put to work in their afterlife. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I prefer the first one, actually. Swinging in at number 4, the Eliza Battle. And for this one, we're pinching the parameters of the 7 seas, and instead we're taking a look at one of the most notorious maritime disasters that instead of on an ocean occurred on a river. The Tombigbee River, to be precise, a stretch of water that runs between Columbus, Mississippi and Mobile, Alabama. And here we have the legend of the phantom steamboat of the Tombigbee. Back in 1852, one of the largest river steamboats constructed at the time, the Eliza Battle, was put into service between the 2 southern states. During one particularly cold February in the winter of 1858, after the Eliza Battle had departed the city of Columbus, the ship made its way downriver, stopping on the way at Pickensville, Gainesville, Demopolis and several other small river landings. By the time that the steamboat had left off at Demopolis though, it was filled to the rafters with passengers, and not only passengers but also over 1,200 bales of cotton to be ferried to the final stop. Now, although it roughly still remains a complete mystery, around 2 AM on March the 1st, 1858, about 30 miles downriver from Demopolis, the crew of the Eliza Battle awoke startled to discover that the cotton bales on the main deck were on fire. Flames soared and quickly engulfed the ship's hull, soon spreading out of control despite the frigid temperatures attributed to the odd, gusty evening. The boat continued onward though, the entirety of its exterior completely engulfed in flames and cut off from their lifeboats. The passengers, many of them who had awoken dressed in their night clothes, were forced to plunge into the icy river below. Now, some of them survived, mainly by floating atop the remaining cotton bales, but all in all, over 33 people lost their lives, both crew and passengers included. The Eliza Battle quickly sank beneath the water, the wreckage of which still lingers at the bottom of the Tombigbee River. It's said that on a particularly cold and windy night, the Eliza Battle will emerge from the icy fog engulfed in flames, once again a warning sign of an oncoming ill omen. Next up at number 3, the fire ship of Baie de Chaleur. Which, I mean, come on guys, that's probably the most awesome sounding title to anything on these historical lists, right? The fire ship of Baie de Chaleur sounds like something that Geralt of Rivia himself would sail down to Skellig after a summer in Toussaint, but whatever, that's by the by, because this vessel in question actually takes us over to the eternally autumnal eastern tones of New Brunswick, Canada. Now, the fire ship of Baie de Chaleur is also more commonly referred to as the Chaleur Phantom or the Phantom Ship, and it often takes the form of a series of ghost lights just before a storm, appearing as a large 3-mast galley. Now, the actual mechanics of this phenomenon are dubiously debated, and many believe it's caused to be down to either the weather phenomenon of St. Elmo's fire or an undersea release of natural gas after a patch of rotting vegetation just off the New Brunswick coast. I mean, that's a completely different story entirely, but what we're concerned with is the actual origin of the fire ship, the history of which is equal parts tragic and gruesome. As the legend goes, back in 1501, a Portuguese captain had spent a year pillaging the coast of Baie de Chaleur, capturing Mi'kmaq natives for the slave trade. However, his cutthroat agenda was miscalculated, as a year later, when he returned to the region on his second voyage, he was captured, tortured and killed by the Mi'kmaq people in revenge for their kidnapped tribesmen. The legend didn't end there though, because a year later, the brother of the Portuguese captain sailed to the bay in search of his missing sibling, and upon seeing the same flags, the Mi'kmaq people attacked the ship, setting it ablaze whilst it was moored in the bay. Cut off, burning, and with certain death facing them, the sailors swore to haunt the bay for 1,000 years as their blazing fire ship sank into the Bay of Chaleur. Now, whilst later both Mi'kmaq and Portuguese casualties washed up on the shores of the island, the bay itself is said to be haunted by those that perished, often appearing as distraught sailors and warriors, their flesh burnt by the fire ship. Swinging in at number 2, the Princess Augusta. And on the topic of ghostly phenomenon, this particular apparition is perhaps one of the most well documented ghost ships of the 18th century, although the actual history behind it is shrouded in intrigue. Although the folklore account of this particular vessel is based upon the historical wreck of the Princess Augusta, a ship that sailed out of Rotterdam in August 1738 under the command of Captain George Long, in more modern records it is commonly referred to as the Palatine, where the Palatine Light, the apparition in question, famously gets its name. And the reason for that is down to the nature of the ship. Alongside 14 of his crew, Captain Long's directive was to transport 240 German immigrants from the Palatinate region of the Rhineland to build a new life for themselves in Philadelphia. However, we know that this is the tale of a ghost ship, and from the offset, their vessel was afflicted with some terribly tragic luck. Not long after passing through the Atlantic, the Princess Augusta's water supply was contaminated, causing a fever and flux to spread through the ship, killing 200 of its passengers, half the crew and the captain himself. The ship's first mate, Andrew Brooke, quickly took command as the survivors leapt out of the frying pan and into the fire, getting hit by severe storms that pushed the ship far off course to the north. They then endured 3 months of extreme weather and dwindling supplies, when eventually they emerged shipwrecked in Block Island, not far from Rhode Island. Here the tale splits, but one thing is certain: Andrew Brooke, the first mate and commanding captain, took what remained of his crew and rowed ashore without once looking back at the cursed ship. It is said that some of the passengers survived, aided by the Block Islanders, but little to nothing is known about those that survived the entire voyage. As the legend goes, the Princess Augusta was set alight from the coast in the dead of night, pushed out to sea to burn and then disappear. At night, they say that if you listen closely, you can hear the screams of those that didn't make it back to shore. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the Duc of Dantzig. And for our most terrifying ghost ship on this list, of course it has to be a brutal and bloodthirsty pirate ship, a privateer that plundered her way across the Caribbean, notoriously in the name of her royal namesake, the Duc of Dantzig. This ship's seafaring career was relatively quiet for the first few years of service, mainly acting as more of a letter of marque, a deterrent more so than a private man of war. However, her fate quickly changed after changing command and sailing under the French captain Francois Aregnadour. Now, his intentions were to sail and plunder his way across the 7 seas, and plunder he did from Liverpool to Barbados, capturing and scuttling more ships than he could count on his way. However, despite being a vessel of the French Empire, strangely enough, sometime after late June 1812, the Duc of Dantzig just disappeared, although there are several records catching a glimpse of her around Canada but she was never seen again. After the last mention of her, it was thought that she'd been destroyed by a tropical cyclone or sunk in the night after an encounter with a British frigate. However, as the legend goes, that was not the last of the Duc of Dantzig. After the golden age of piracy had been sated, a captain by the name of Napoleon Gallois relayed his records of a French frigate encountering the wreck of the Duc of Dantzig drifting listlessly at sea. As his crew witnessed, the ship itself was covered from helm to hull in dried blood, and in staggered rows were the putrefying corpses of her crew, many of which were brutally crucified to the masts or the deck. Strangely enough, there were no signs that she had been in recent battle. In fact, despite the blood, she was pristine, no shot holes, and her sails and rigging intact. After searching the ship, Gallois' crew found a stack of blood-stained papers identifying the captain as the same Francois Aregnadour. And then, as they left, the crew of the frigate set the brig ablaze, forever to be buried at sea, along with her mysteries. Kicking off at number 5, the SS Bechimo. Now, although many tales of ghost ships and their legend are mired in murky mystery and spotty historical records, this one is perhaps one of the most well-documented cases of a ghost ship in nautical history. Built in Sweden in the year 1914, the SS Bechimo was used as a trading vessel for routes between Hamburg and Sweden in and throughout the First World War. After the war, though, it was shipped over to Canada, where it was employed by the Hudson's Bay Company, carrying cargo throughout the Arctic region. There, on October 1st, 1931, during a routine voyage, a devastating storm blew in, and the Bechimo was trapped in pack ice just off the coast of Alaska. The crew quickly abandoned ship, traveling over the ice to the nearest town of Barrow, Alaska, where they took shelter. Several days later, after the storm had subsided, the crew returned to retrieve their precious cargo, only to find that the SS Bechimo had disappeared. Her captain decided that she must have broken up during the storm and sunk, but a few days later, an Inuit seal hunter told the captain that he had spotted the Bechimo nearly 50 miles away from their initial position. As the story goes, the Bechimo didn't sink at all, and for several decades after her abandonment, she sailed the Arctic coast completely unmanned. In fact, the SS Bechimo was seen on numerous occasions throughout the following century, and several crews even managed to board her. In fact, the last recorded sighting was by a group of Inuit in 1969, a staggering 38 years after she was abandoned. Her ultimate fate? No one knows, but it's safe to say that somewhere out there in the frozen north, the SS Bechimo is still sailing. Next up at number 4, the Jenny. Now, this one is a little bit murkier, to say the least, and historical accounts have varied from person to person. One thing always remains the same though: if the accounts are true, then this nautical tale is perhaps one of the most bleakest and most despairing cases of a crew being lost at sea. As the story goes, the Jenny, an English schooner that set sail from its home port of the Isle of Wight in 1822, became frozen in an ice barrier just off the Drake Passage sometime in its voyage in 1823. Nearly a decade later, in 1840, the stark remains of the ship had been dislodged by the ice, only to be discovered by a nearby whaling ship. As some accounts tell, when the crew first saw the ship, they saw 7 figures standing to attention on the main deck, and so thought that the vessel was manned. As they got closer though, they discovered the grim truth. The 7 figures standing to attention were in fact frozen in place, turned to ice by the Arctic cold. Things only got worse from there though, and as the crew of the whaling ship explored the vessel, they found more and more bodies frozen in time deeper below the deck. As some reports go, as the crew came to the captain's cabin, they found him frozen in place with a pen in his hand. The final note written in his log read, May 4th, 1823. No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive. Yeah, spooky stuff. Coming in at number 3, the SS Valencia. Now, this one's a little bit more interesting, to say the least, because it's a verified fact that the wreckage of the SS Valencia can still be seen to this day, scattered along the beach and rocky shoreline of Vancouver Island's West Coast Trail. After the ship struck a reef during a storm in 1906, the wreckage of the SS Valencia was considered to be the worst maritime disaster along the western North American coast, otherwise known as the Graveyard of the Pacific. The Valencia was a small ship, a passenger steamer that had a long history of carrying both passengers, cargo and troops, but at the time of her ruin she was operating as a tour boat, often running routes from San Francisco and up to Seattle. During the wreckage, tragically 136 souls were lost, with rescue efforts unable to access the Valencia in the ravaging storm. But our ghostly tale lies with those that tried to escape. You see, as the legend goes, in panic the crew launched all of the Valencia's lifeboats, going against the captain's orders, all of which went horribly wrong. 3 flipped on descent, dozens more capsized after reaching the water, and the last one disappeared out into the waves. Since the disaster of the SS Valencia, countless sailors and fishermen have reported sightings of these lifeboats listlessly floating upon the water during particularly calm days at sea. As some of the tales go, these lifeboats are still filled with the skeletal remains of the lost souls of the SS Valencia. Next up, at number 2, the Copenhagen. And it's quite the title really, because the Copenhagen is considered by most to be one of the greatest maritime mysteries of the modern era, with only whispers, rumours and speculation as to its ultimate fate. Built for the Danish East Asiatic Trading Company in 1921, it was the world's largest sailing ship at the time, and primarily served as a sail training vessel for young cadets. In the eyes of many, it was the most impressive sailing ship ever built. However, as the story goes, on September 21st, 1928, the Copenhagen departed from northern Jutland for Buenos Aires on its 10th and ultimately final voyage. A total of 75 people were aboard, and the journey was planned to span all the way to Melbourne, Australia, and then back to Europe. But tragically, as we know, it was never seen again. The thing was though, the captain of the ship, Hans Andersen, was renowned for going long periods at sea without sending any messages, and so it wasn't until nearly 6 months later that the Danish company sent a search party. No wreckage or remains have ever been found. However, following the next several years of the Copenhagen's disappearance, there were a number of highly reputable sightings of a 5-masted ship that fit perfectly its description. In July of 1930, the crew of an Argentine freighter sighted what they referred to as a phantom ship during a gale. Their captain noted in his records that this may be the Wrath of the Copenhagen. Dozens of stories and tales have perpetuated around the ultimate fate of the Copenhagen, but the truth is, we may never know. In all likelihood though, it's still out there, somewhere, floating on the endless tide. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the Seabird. And this story is the literal definition of a ghost ship, and one of the most saltiest sea yarns that I've heard spun in a while. Although this one has a few more twists and turns that you may not have first seen coming. As the legend goes, in the year 1750, a vessel named the Seabird was idling off the coast of Newport Harbour in Rhode Island, and had quickly attracted quite a crowd on the shore due to its elaborate craftsmanship. Soon enough though, the crowd of onlookers noticed that there was something strange about the Seabird. There was no one manning the ship, not a soul in sight. As the legend goes, several moments later, the ship, as if by a supernatural wind, perfectly sailed itself through the rough breakers of the beach, gently landing on the nearby Easton's beach. There, a few brave souls boarded the vessel, only to find the Seabird completely deserted, save for a boiling kettle on the stove, and strangely enough, breakfast already prepared at the table. Now, some accounts state that a group of fishermen had passed the Seabird a few hours before and had even spoken to the captain themselves. Where had the crew gone? What had happened in the few hours that had passed since their last sighting? The truth of it is that no one may ever know, and such is the nature of ghostly tales from the sea. But, well, this is where things get a little stranger still, and take this final caveat with a pinch of sea salt. But as the legend goes, decades later, an old sailor reported to a New England journalist his deepest, darkest secret. In a fit of rage, he had murdered his entire crew just before making port, throwing their bodies into the ocean. And the name of that ship? Well, the Seabird, of course. Kicking off at number 5, the Kaz 2, which perhaps is one of the most terrifying modern instances of the term ghost ship, and one of the most profoundly tragic unsolved mysteries of the deep blue sea. The Kaz 2, which was publicly dubbed the Ghost Yacht, was a 9.8 meter catamaran which was found drifting listlessly 88 nautical miles off the northeastern coast of Australia on the 20th of April 2007. The 3 men aboard, who were all residents of Perth in Western Australia, were all incredibly experienced sailors. There were 56-year-old Derek Batten and brothers Peter Tunstall and James Tunstall, who were 69 and 63 respectively. Their whereabouts still remains a mystery to this day, and the fate of these 3 men perhaps may never be known. What made it even stranger is that when the Kaz 2 was eventually found by the Coast Guard, there were no signs of distress, no signs of boat damage, or even a struggle between the 3 men. It was as if they just vanished out of thin air. coffee cups were left out and all the life jackets on board remained stowed away, indicating that the trio never felt at risk. In an even more curious turn of events, rescue teams discovered video footage of the three men on a handheld camera, seemingly hours before they disappeared. It showed them fishing, relaxing in the sun with the motor off, and offered no clues as to how these three experienced sailors disappeared at sea. Although an inquiry was later drawn, no definitive conclusions were ever reached, and only theories remain about the ultimate fate of the Kaz 2. Coming in at number 4, the Lady Lovibond. Of course, no list would be complete without a good old sea shanty of jilted lovers and ghostly revenge. As the legend goes, the Lady Lovibond was a schooner that is alleged to have been wrecked on the Goodwin Sands just off the southern coast of Kent on the 13th of February 1749. But if you ask any old sailor worth their salt, they'll tell you that it just so happens to have a habit of reappearing every 50 or so years as a ghost ship. As the story goes, the captain of the ship, a man named Simon Reed, had just been married to his bride Annetta and was celebrating the joyous occasion with a cruise bound for Oporto in Portugal. Now, it is high time to mention that a long-standing sailor's superstition was that back in the day, it was grave bad luck to bring a woman on board, and in many ways, the legend of the Lady Lovibond is a cautionary tale that exemplifies that fact. According to the tale, the ship's first mate, a man named John Rivers, was a rival for the hand of the captain's young wife, and in a jealous fit of rage, he killed the crewman manning the ship's wheel and steered the vessel into the treacherous Goodwin Sands, killing absolutely everyone on board. And if you're asking me, that is a stark overreaction. But nevertheless, since that fateful day in 1749, the Lady Lovibond has been sighted on numerous occasions with an ethereal, ghostly glow, eternally bound to wander the ocean. Next up at number 3, the Mary Celeste, which in fact may very well be the world's most infamous ghost ship, as well as one of the longest enduring mysteries of the seven seas. Built in Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia in 1861 and launched under the new name of the Mary Celeste in 1868, this merchant brigantine sailed uneventfully across the Atlantic for years as a seaworthy, efficient vessel. It wasn't until her fateful voyage in 1872 where the true ghostly legend began, which has since gathered theories that vary from submarine earthquakes, water spouts, an attack by a giant squid, and even paranormal intervention. No one will truly know the ultimate fate of the Mary Celeste, with every single soul on board never being seen or heard from again, which is a terrifying thought in itself, isn't it? The Mary Celeste was discovered adrift and deserted just off the coast of the Azores Islands on December 5th, 1872. It was a Canadian vessel, the De Gratia, which found her in a disheveled but seaworthy condition under partial sail and with one lifeboat missing. The last entry in the ship's log was dated 10 days earlier, which detailed the vessel's last known location, before these mysterious, infamous events unfolded. On board was the ship's captain, Benjamin S. Briggs, his wife Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 8 seasoned crew members, all veterans of the sea. It poses the question, what dire threat did the Mary Celeste face that caused a highly experienced captain to abandon his ship? Nothing was stolen, all of the crew's possessions and cargo were exactly as they'd left them, but in all likelihood, we may never know. Swinging in at number 2, the Flying Dutchman. Of course, this legendary vessel couldn't not make this list. The ghost ship that can tragically never make port, doomed to navigate the perilous ocean for eternity. In actual fact though, the Flying Dutchman has had such an impact on nautical culture that it's easy to overlook the treacherous tale of its origin. It is thought that the legend of the Flying Dutchman first originated from the 17th century golden age of the Dutch East India Trade Company, a mega corporation that had a stranglehold monopoly on the Dutch spice trade that ran throughout the 16 and 1700s, where tale was told of a Dutch man of war that was lost just off the Cape of Good Hope. Purportedly, every soul on board perished after being ravaged by a violent tempest. The following few days, numerous other trading ships reported seeing a ghostly, ethereal vessel out in the foggy mist of the ocean, flying the exact same colours as the Dutch vessel. Since then, the Flying Dutchman has gathered notoriety as the worst omen you could ever hope for of a phantom ship that heralds the demise of an entire crew, with sightings continuing all the way into the 19th and 20th centuries. In fact, perhaps the most recognised sighting was by King George V himself during a 3-year voyage in 1881 just off the coast of Australia. He noted in his personal log that 13 people had seen the same glowing Flying Dutchman in the early hours of the morning, and later in the day, the ordinary crewman who had spotted the vessel fell from the foremast and, in his words, was smashed to atoms. It's a little bit worrying, that one, eh? And finally, our number 1 spot, the Orang Medan. And where do we even begin with the bizarre, perplexing legend of the Orang Medan, perhaps the most terrifyingly unexplainable instances of a ghostly shipwreck in history? But, well, the leading physical theory of the Orang Medan may be even more horrifying than it first appears. As the legend goes, at some time in June 1947, an American vessel by the name of the Silver Star picked up several distress calls from a nearby Dutch merchant ship, the Orang Medan. A radio operator aboard the troubled vessel sent a message in Morse code. In rushed, confused dots and dashes, it read, "We float. All officers, including the captain, dead in chart room and on the bridge. Probably whole of crew dead." And then a few moments later, after even more confused dots and frantic dashes, two words came through very clearly. "I die." Then silence. Nothing more was heard of them. But well, when the Silver Star eventually located and boarded the apparently undamaged and otherwise seaworthy Orang Medan, what they found absolutely horrified them. Every single person aboard was found dead, sprawled on their backs, frozen in fear with their mouths gaping open and their eyes staring straight ahead. There were no survivors, but even more terrifying, apparently no signs of injury or foul play. Just as the Silver Star crew was preparing to tow the ship to a nearby port, a fire broke out in the Orang Medan, which shortly exploded before finally sinking into the depths. Since this horrifying incident, theories have ranged from the vessel carrying a highly dangerous chemical nerve agent to an entanglement with the CIA after the result of a secret experiment to an unprovoked alien assault. But if you haven't already sensed a theme with this particular list, it seems that we may never know.